3 weeks had passed since the first humans landed on Valanxi Prime. What had started as a small group of volunteers had grown into something much larger. Ships kept arriving, slipping through gaps in the Concorde blockade or simply daring the patrol vessels to fire on unarmed humanitarian craft. The medical camp had expanded into a small city of temporary shelters and treatment centers. Minjun had worked miracles with limited resources, constructing atmospheric processors that pushed back the toxic air and created safe zones where both humans and Valanxi could move freely. Dr. Yuna ran the main hospital with an efficiency that amazed everyone who watched her work. She had trained dozens of human volunteers in basic Valanxi medicine, and together they treated hundreds of patients every day. But it was Jinne who made the breakthrough. That changed everything. She burst into the command tent one evening, with her hair wild and her eyes bright with excitement. "I found it," she announced. "I know how to cure the gray rot." Everyone stopped what they were doing. Sioha set down the supply manifest she had been reviewing and gave Jinne her full attention. "Tell us." Jinne pulled up a holographic display showing the molecular structure of the plague. The gray rod was designed to attack Valanxi cellular structures specifically, she explained. But human antibodies have a unique property that the weapons designers never anticipated. She highlighted a section of the display. "Our immune systems evolved to fight off everything Earth could throw at us. Diseases that would kill any other species barely slow us down. And those same antibodies can neutralize the rot's active components, so human blood can cure them," Yuna said. Already seeing where this was going. Not exactly cure them, but stop the progression and give their bodies a chance to heal naturally, Jinne said. "The treatment requires direct transfusions of human blood. Multiple sessions over several weeks." Admiral Quan Desham, a retired naval officer who had arrived with his personal vessel and a crew of loyal veterans, spoke up from the corner of the tent. "What are the risks to the human donors?" Jinne hesitated. "The process is taxing. Repeated donations will cause fatigue, weakness, and potentially long-term health effects. And there is a small chance of more serious complications." Silence fell over the room. Everyone understood what this meant to save the Valanxi. Humans would have to sacrifice pieces of themselves. Sioha looked around at the faces of her people, tired, dirty. Far from home, they had already given up so much. "I will go first," she said. "Me too," Minjin added immediately. Within an hour, a line of human volunteers stretched across the camp. Doctors and engineers, pilots and teachers, soldiers and civilians. They rolled up their sleeves and offered their blood to save a species they had never known. Before coming to this world, the first transfusions were tense. No one knew for certain that the treatment would work outside of laboratory conditions. But when the first Valanxi patient opened her eyes and her crystalline body began to glow with renewed light, a cheer went up that could be heard across the entire camp. "It works," Yuna breathed, tears streaming down her face. Word spread quickly through the Valanxi population for the first time in months. There was hope, but not everyone was celebrating the next morning. A new ship appeared in orbit. It was a Concorde diplomatic vessel carrying Representative Vorath, a senior official sent to negotiate, or rather, to deliver an ultimatum. Vorath was a Deshan, a tall insectoid species known for their cold logic and colder hearts. He looked around the human camp with obvious distaste. "You have one planetary rotation to pack up and leave," he announced without preamble. "After that, the Concorde fleet will move in and remove you by force." Sioha stood her ground. "We are conducting a humanitarian mission to save a dying species. The Concorde has no legal authority to stop us." "The Concorde has whatever authority it decides it has," Vorath replied. "Your presence here is an embarrassment to the Assembly. And certain powerful members want that embarrassment eliminated. You mean the members who created this plague in the first place? Ginny said sharply. Vorath's compound eyes flickered. I do not know what you are talking about. Yes, you do, Sioha said. We have evidence that this plague was engineered as a bioweapon. We have evidence that it was deployed deliberately to wipe out the Valanxi. And we have evidence that senior Concord members ordered the cover-up. For a long moment, Vorath said nothing. Then he leaned closer, speaking quietly so only Sioha could hear. Even if that were true, what difference would it make? The Concord is too powerful to challenge. And your little band of bleeding hearts cannot protect anyone. Sioha smiled grimly. Watch us. She turned to face the gathered crowd of humans in Valanxi. Open a broadcast channel, she ordered. Every frequency, every network. I want the entire galaxy to hear this. When the channel was open, she spoke directly into the camera. My name is Yun Sioha, and I am speaking to you from Valanxi Prime, where our species faces extinction while the Galactic Concord does nothing. She gestured at the camp around her. These are humans, volunteers from Earth and its colonies who came here because we believe that every life has value. We are not soldiers or politicians. We are doctors and engineers and ordinary people who refuse to look away. Her voice grew stronger. The Concord has ordered us to leave. They say the Valanxi are not worth saving. They say the cost is too high. But we say that the cost of doing nothing is higher. She looked directly at the camera. We are not leaving. We will stay here as long as it takes, and if the Concord wants to remove us, they will have to do it in front of the entire galaxy. She cut the transmission. Vorath stared at her with something that might have been respect or might have been disgust. You have made a powerful enemy today. Human. Good, Sioha replied. Enemies I can fight. Indifference is what kills. The diplomat left without another word that night. Sensors detected movement at the edge of the system. Concord warships were gathering. Admiral Quan called an emergency meeting. They are serious, he said, pointing at the tactical display. That is enough firepower to reduce this entire planet to rubble. They would not dare, Minjin protested. Not after Sioha's broadcast. They might, Quan replied. If they think the alternative is worse, Sioha studied the display. Dozen warships against one old naval vessel and a handful of cargo transports. The odds were impossible. But then, they had been impossible from the start. We hold the line, she said finally. Whatever comes. We do not abandon these people. Quan nodded slowly. I was hoping you would say that. He turned to his crew. Battle stations. Everyone, we have a planet to protect. As the humans prepared for what might be their final stand, Elder Kavani approached Sioha. Why do you do this? She asked. Your people will die here, and for what? For strangers. Sioha thought about the question. Because somewhere in our history, humans learned that the measure of a civilization is not how it treats the powerful, but how it treats the helpless. And we decided we wanted to be the kind of people who help. She looked up at the stars where death was gathering, even when it costs us everything. The Concord fleet hung in orbit like a thread made of metal and fire. Admiral Quan positioned his single vessel directly between the warships and the planet below, knowing it was a symbolic gesture at best. They are hailing us, his communications. Officer reported. Quan nodded. Put them through. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Fleet Commander Rasik, a reptilian Vorton known throughout the galaxy for his ruthlessness. Human vessel. You are ordered to stand down immediately and surrender all personnel on the planet's surface. And if we refuse, Quan asked calmly, then we will open fire. Your ship will be destroyed, and we will proceed to the surface to complete our mission. Quan leaned back in his chair. Let me ask you something. Commander, when you report back to your superiors, how will you explain firing on unmedical personnel? How will you justify killing doctors and nurses who came here to save lives? I do not need to justify anything to you, human. No, but you will need to justify it to the rest of the galaxy. Sioha's broadcast has been seen on 1,000 worlds. People are watching. They are waiting to see what happens next. Rasik's scale shifted, and what might have been irritation. Public opinion is irrelevant. The Concord's authority must be maintained. Then maintain it by doing the right thing. Quan said, "Stand down your fleet and let us continue our work." The communication cut off without a response on the surface. Sioha watched the standoff on a portable display while directing operations at the medical camp. The treatment program was working, but they were running out of human donors. Many volunteers had given blood so many times that they were barely able to stand. Yuna approached with grim news. "We have 3 more humans in critical condition from the transfusions. Their bodies cannot handle anymore, and the Valanxi patients improving. But slowly, we need more time than we have." Sioha rubbed her tired eyes. They had come so far, saved so many, but it still was not enough. Tavex appeared at her elbow. "Elder Kivani wishes to speak with you. She says it is urgent." Sioha followed him to the ancient archives beneath the Hall of Elders. Kivani was waiting with a data crystal in her fragile hands. "I have been thinking about what must be done," the elder said. "You have risked everything for my people, and we have given you nothing in return. We did not come here expecting payment. I know, and that makes what I am about to say even more difficult." Kivani activated the crystal, and the chamber filled with star maps more detailed than anything Sioha had ever seen. "These are the complete archives of my ancestors," Kivani explained. "Every route they mapped, every system they discovered, every resource deposit they found." She paused. "This information could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. It is the reason we were targeted, and it is the reason the Concord will not stop until we are gone. What are you suggesting?" Kivani looked at Sioha with ancient, weary eyes. "Release it. Send these maps to every corner of the galaxy. If everyone has access to this information, then killing us becomes pointless. The secret will no longer need to be kept." Sioha understood immediately. It was a desperate gamble that would make powerful enemies furious and potentially destabilize entire regions of space. But it might also save the Valanxi. "There is more," Kivani said. "Hidden in these archives is proof of who created the plague. Names, communications, financial records, everything needed to expose the conspiracy." Sioha felt her heart racing. "If we release that, you will start a political firestorm. That could tear the Concord apart." They stared at each other. "Do it," Sioha said finally. She spent the next hour working with Janae to prepare the transmission. They encoded everything onto multiple frequencies, bounced it off relay stations throughout the sector, and sent it to every news network, every government database, and every public archive they could reach. The galaxy was about to learn the truth. The response came faster than anyone expected. Within hours, the Concord fleet received new orders. Rasik's voice came through again, this time with an edge of panic. "What have you done?" "Human, I have given the galaxy a choice," Sioha replied. "They can continue to let the powerful crush the weak, or they can demand something better." On worlds across the galaxy, the revelation sparked outrage. The evidence was undeniable. A consortium of wealthy Concord members had engineered the plague to eliminate the Valanxi and preserve their trade monopolies. Public anger erupted into protests. Governments that had stayed silent began issuing condemnations. Species that had never cared about the Valanxi before now demanded justice. And then something unexpected happened. More human ships arrived, not a handful, not a dozen, but scores of them dropping out of faster-than-light travel in waves. They were not military vessels. They were cargo ships and colony transports, passenger liners and converted freighters. private yachts, and aging shuttles held together. With hope and determination, the human flotilla formed a protective sphere around Valangsy Prime. A transmission came through from the lead ship. "This is Captain Yoon Jae-in of the civilian vessel Horizon's Edge. We received your broadcast and we came as fast as we could. Tell us where you need us." Seoha felt tears running down her face. She had never met Jae-in, had never even heard his name before this moment, but he had heard her call and he had come. They all had ordinary humans who had seen suffering and refused to look away. "Welcome to Valangsy Prime." She managed to say, "We have a lot of work to do." On his warship, Fleet Commander Rasik surveyed the new arrivals with growing horror. His orders had been clear: remove the humans and restore order. But his orders had anticipated a handful of rogue volunteers. Not an armada of civilian vessels carrying thousands of witnesses. If he opened fire now, the galaxy would never forgive the Concord commander. His tactical officer said nervously, "What are your orders?" Rasik stared at the display for a long moment. The humans had no weapons, no military training, no official backing, and yet somehow they had won hold position. He said finally, "And contact the assembly. Tell them we need new instructions." On the surface, the new arrivals were already deploying fresh medical supplies. Poured into the camp, more human volunteers lined up to donate blood. The treatment program expanded to reach Valangsy communities across the planet and in orbit. The warships that had come to destroy them simply watched powerless in the face of human stubbornness. Admiral Kwan allowed himself a small smile. "You know," he said to no one in particular, "I have been in the military for 40 years, and this is the first time I have ever won a battle without firing a shot." On the surface, Seoha stood with Elder Kivani and watched the ships descending from the sky. "Is this what your species is always like?" Kivani asked in wonder. Seoha thought about all the terrible things humans had done throughout their history. The wars, the cruelty, the indifference. But she also thought about moments like this, when ordinary people chose to be extraordinary. Not always, she admitted, but sometimes when it matters most, this is exactly who we are. 6 months had passed since the first human ships broke through the quarantine line. The medical camp had grown into a permanent settlement, and the crystal forests of Valangsy Prime were slowly beginning to heal. Janae walked through one of the restored groves with Tivex at her side, watching new growth emerge from what had been barren ground. "Your ancestors would be proud," she told him. Tivex's crystalline body shimmered with colors that had not been visible when they first met. The treatments had worked, and he was one of millions who would survive because humans had refused to give up. "My ancestors never imagined that Deathworlders would become our greatest allies," he said. "They taught us to fear species from harsh worlds. That they were wrong about your kind." Janae smiled. "We have a lot of practice proving people wrong across the galaxy." The political landscape had transformed. The release of the evidence had triggered the largest scandal in Concord history. 3 member species were implicated in the conspiracy. To create the gray rot, their representatives had fled to avoid prosecution. Their assets had been seized, and their governments faced demands for reparations that would take generations to pay. The Concord Assembly had convened an emergency session to address the crisis. For the first time in its history, humans were invited to participate. Seoha stood in the vast chamber surrounded by representatives from hundreds of species. Some looked at her with respect, others with fear, and a few with barely concealed hostility. Representative Varath called the session to order. His demeanor had changed since their first meeting. The evidence had proven everything the humans claimed, and even a cold Deshan could recognize when his side had lost. "We are gathered to determine the status of Valangsy Prime and the human presence there," Varath announced. "The floor is open for statements." A tall Meridian ambassador rose first. "The humans violated 17 Concord statutes by crossing the quarantine line. They must be punished to maintain the integrity of our laws. Murmurs of agreement rippled through parts of the chamber. Another representative stood. This one, from a species HFY did not recognize. The laws they violated were enacted to cover up genocide. Are we really going to punish people for exposing a crime? The debate continued for hours. Arguments flew back and forth about sovereignty and precedent and the sacred nature of Concord authority. HFY waited patiently for her turn to speak. Finally, Vorath called on her. The assembly recognizes the human representative. HFY walked to the central platform where all eyes could see her. I am not a diplomat, she began. I am a former combat medic who spent most of her career patching up soldiers after battles that should never have been fought. I do not know the proper protocols for addressing this body. And honestly, I do not much care. A few representatives shifted uncomfortably. What I do know is that when we arrived on Valaxi Prime, we found a species dying alone, abandoned by everyone they thought they could trust. And I know that right now, because humans decided to help, millions of Valaxi are alive who would otherwise be dead. She looked around the chamber. You can debate laws and statutes and precedents all you want. But at the end of the day, the question is simple. What kind of galaxy do you want to live in? She pointed at the empty seats where the conspirators had once sat. They chose a galaxy where the strong could exterminate the weak without consequences, where profit mattered more than lives, where entire species could be erased if they became inconvenient. Her voice rose. Humans chose differently. We chose a galaxy where people help each other, where the powerful protect the vulnerable, where no one has to die alone because the math did not work out. She paused. So go ahead and punish us if you need to. Declare us outlaws. Ban us from Concord space. It will not change anything, because the next time someone needs help and no one else will provide it, humans will show up anyway. She stepped back from the platform. That is what Deathworlders do. The chamber was silent. Then, slowly, a sound began to build. It started with the Valaxi delegation. Elder Kavani leading her people in a gesture of respect that involved striking their crystalline hands together. Other species joined in, each expressing approval in their own way. The sound grew until it filled the chamber like thunder. Vorath waited for quiet before speaking. The assembly will now vote on the matter of human actions on Valaxi Prime. The results were decisive by an overwhelming majority. The Concord voted to drop all charges against the human volunteers. More than that, they voted to officially recognize the new partnership between humanity and the Valaxi. And in a final unexpected move, they voted to reform the quarantine laws that had allowed this tragedy to happen in the first place. HFY stood with Admiral Kwan and watched the announcement being broadcast across the galaxy. Not bad for a bunch of outlaws. Kwan observed, we got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. You showed them what humans are capable of when we actually care about something. That is more powerful than any fleet. 3 months later, HFY stood on a landing pad outside the newly rebuilt Valaxi capital. A ship was preparing to launch. The first joint human Valaxi exploration vessel ever constructed. It would follow the ancient star maps to destinations unknown. Crewed by volunteers from both species working together, Tavex was among the crew. As was Jinne. They had become close during the long months of recovery. Their friendship, a symbol of what their peoples could achieve together. Elder Kavani approached HFY as the boarding call sounded. I never properly thanked you, the old Valaxi said. You do not need to thank me. Perhaps not, but I wish to understand. When you first received my message, you did not know us. You had nothing to gain by helping. Why did you come? HFY watched the crew members filing onto the ship. Human and Valaxi side by side. Because you needed us, she said simply. That is what we do. Kivani studied her for a long moment. Your species is terrifying, she said finally. HFY raised an eyebrow. We have visited dozens of worlds, met hundreds of species, and none of them frightened us as much as you do. Not because you are violent, though you are. Not because you are dangerous, though you are that too. The elder's eyes glimmered with something like wonder. You frightened us because you care so deeply about strangers. You will walk into fire for people you have never met. You will challenge empires for beings who cannot offer you anything in return. That kind of love is more terrifying than any weapon. Sioha smiled. Maybe that is why they call us Deathworlders. The ship lifted off in a burst of light. Sioha watched it climb toward the stars, carrying hope and possibility toward the unknown behind her. The crystal forests swayed in the gentle wind, new growth sparkled in the sunlight. Life had returned to a world that was supposed to die, and in the hearts of every Valanxi who had survived, there was a new understanding when the galaxy abandoned them. The Deathworlders decided to save them, not for profit or power or glory, but simply because it was the right thing to do, and that made all the difference. The first thing Sioha noticed when she stepped off the ship was the silence. Valanxi Prime should have been alive with sound, with music and laughter and the gentle chiming of crystal winds. Instead, there was nothing but the whisper of dying forests, the crystal trees that had once made this world famous across the galaxy stood gray and lifeless, their beautiful structures crumbling at the slightest touch. Jeannie ran a scanner over the nearest formation and shook her head. The rot is everywhere, she said. It has spread through the entire ecosystem. The air was thick with particles that would have killed most galactic species within hours. Sioha breathed it in and felt nothing more than a slight irritation in her throat. Deathworlder lungs, Minjun said with a grim smile. Good for something after all. They made their way toward the capital city following coordinates that Elder Kavani had provided. The closer they got, the worse things became. Bodies lay in the streets. The Langxi, who had simply collapsed where they stood as the rot consumed them. Their crystalline forms had turned dull and gray, some of them already crumbling into dust. Yuna stopped beside one of them and knelt down. This one is still alive, she said urgently. The Valanxi was young, barely more than a child by their species standards. Its light was fading, but not gone. Yuna pulled out her medical kit and began working. Sioha watched in amazement as the human doctor treated an alien species she had never encountered before, improvising solutions on the spot, based on nothing but instinct and determination. I need to stabilize the cellular degradation, Yuna muttered. If I can slow the rot even a little bit, we might have time to find a real cure. She injected something into the Valanxi's translucent body and waited. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the creature's light grew slightly brighter. It is working, Jine said. Whatever you did, it is actually working. A sound behind them made everyone spin around. A group of Valanxi had gathered at the edge of the street, watching the humans with expressions that mixed hope and terror in equal measure. One of them stepped forward, a young male whose crystalline body still held traces of blue and green light. You are the Deathworlders, he said, his voice trembling. Sioha nodded slowly. We are humans. We came to help. The young Valanxi looked at his companions, then back at the humans. I am Tevex, he said. Elder Kavani sent me to guide you to her, but I did not believe you would actually come. Why not? Minjun asked. Tevex gestured at the ruins around them. Because no one else did. The Concord abandoned us. Our neighbors closed their borders. Even species we thought were friends turned away when we asked for help. He paused and looked at the humans with something like wonder in his fading eyes. But you came. Deathworlders from a violent world on the other side of the galaxy. You came when no one else would. Take us to Elder Kivani, Sioha said gently. We have much to discuss. Tivix led them through the crumbling city to a structure that had once been magnificent. The Hall of Elders was a towering spire of interwoven crystals, though now much of it had fallen, and what remained was dull with rot. Inside they found Elder Kivani surrounded by the last surviving members of her council. She was ancient, even by Valanchi standards. Her body more great and luminous, but her eyes still held a sharp intelligence. Sioha, she said. Rising slowly to greet them, I sent my message into the void hoping someone would hear. And you answered. We brought medical supplies and equipment, Sioha said. Our xenobiologist believes she may be able to develop a treatment. Kivani's expression shifted to something complicated. Before we discuss cures, there is something you must know about this plague. She gestured for them to follow her deeper into the hall, in a hidden chamber behind the main council room. She showed them a collection of data crystals. These contain the evidence my people gathered before the Concord silenced us. Kivani said, the gray rot is not natural. It was engineered. Janae took one of the crystals and connected it to her scanner. What she found made her go pale. This is a bioweapon, she said. Someone designed this specifically to target Valanxi biology. But who would do such a thing? Minjin demanded. What could anyone possibly gain from destroying your people? Kivani moved to another part of the chamber and activated a holographic display. Stars filled the air around them. Thousands of them, connected by lines that formed a vast network. My ancestors were among the first spacefaring species in this region of the galaxy, Kivani explained. They mapped routes to systems that no one else has ever found. Systems rich with resources beyond imagination. Someone wants these maps, Sioha said. Understanding dawning. Someone wants these maps to stay hidden, Kivani corrected. Certain powers within the Concord have built their wealth on controlling resource access. If these routes became public knowledge, their monopolies would collapse. So they decided to kill everyone who knew about them, Yuna said. Her voice thick with disgust, Kivani nodded slowly. We tried to present our evidence to the Concord Assembly, but we were silenced before we could speak. The quarantine is not to contain a plague. It is to contain the truth. Sioha felt the weight of this revelation settling on her shoulders. They had come to save a dying species, but they had stumbled into something much larger, a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of galactic government, a crime that the most powerful beings in known space wanted buried. Along with its victims, this changes things, Janae said quietly. Does it? Sioha asked. Looking around at her team, Minjun crossed his arms and shook his head. We came here to help these people. Finding out that someone tried to murder them on purpose does not make me want to help less. Yuna nodded in agreement. If anything, it makes this more important. We cannot let them get away with genocide. Sioha turned back to Kivani. We will help you. All of you. But first, we need to set up a proper medical camp. Can you show us a location where we can work? For the first time since they had arrived, something like hope flickered in the old Valanxi's eyes. There is a place, she said. Come with me. As they left the chamber, Tivex fell into step beside Sioha. You really are not afraid? He asked. Of what? Of everything, Tivex said. The plague, the Concord, the people who did this. Sioha considered the question carefully. I am afraid, she admitted. But fear has never stopped humans before, and it will not stop us now. Outside, more human ships were breaking through the atmosphere. Sioha had sent word back through her network, and more volunteers had answered the call. They were still badly outnumbered and outgunned, but they were here. And for the Valanxi, that made all the difference. The transmission came through at 3 in the morning, crackling with static and desperation. Sioha sat up in her narrow bunk aboard the human outpost station and listened to the voice that would change everything. Please, the alien voice said. We are dying, and no one will help us. Sioha had served as a combat medic for 12 years. Before taking this quiet posting at the edge of human space, she had seen suffering in many forms. But something in that voice made her blood run cold. The speaker was Valanxi, a species she had only read about in xenobiology reports. They were crystalline beings, fragile and beautiful, their bodies catching light like living gemstones. Their homeworld was a paradise of low gravity and gentle winds, a place where violence was almost unknown, and now they were dying. Sioha pulled up every file she could find on the situation. The Grey Rot had appeared 6 months ago, a plague that attacked the Valanxi at the cellular level. It turned their crystalline flesh dull and brittle until they simply crumbled apart. The Galactic Concord, that vast bureaucracy of alien species that govern most of known space, had responded with a quarantine. No ships in or out, no aid, no hope. She found the official Concord statement and read it 3 times to make sure she understood. After careful analysis, the Council has determined that intervention on Valanxi Prime is not economically viable given the species' limited contributions to galactic commerce and their lack of strategic importance. They had done the math on an entire species and decided the numbers did not add up. Sioha felt something hot and angry building in her chest. She forwarded the transmission to Park Jinne, the station's xenobiologist, and waited. Jinne appeared at her door 10 minutes later, her hair still messy from sleep. "Tell me you did not wake me up for nothing," Jinne said. Sioha played the transmission again. By the end, Jinne was no longer complaining. "The Grey Rot," Jinne said quietly. "I have been following the research papers on it, but I had no idea things had gotten this bad. The Concord sealed all information about it 2 months ago," Sioha said. "They did not want anyone asking uncomfortable questions." "What can we do?" Jinne asked. "Humans have no standing in Concord space, and we certainly cannot authorize any kind of rescue mission." Sioha looked at her friend and made a decision that would put everything she had worked for at risk. "I am not asking for authorization," she said. The next 3 days were a blur of encrypted communications and careful planning. Sioha reached out to every human contact she had, calling in favors she had been saving for years. The response surprised her. A cargo pilot named Cho Minjun volunteered his ship within hours of hearing the situation. Dr. Bayuna, a physician who had lost her license for treating refugees the government wanted forgotten, offered her medical expertise. Others followed. Humans from all walks of life who heard about the Valanxi and felt the same anger Sioha did. "You understand what this means," Sioha told them during a secure video call. "If we cross that quarantine line, we become criminals in the eyes of galactic law. I did not become a doctor to let people die because some bureaucrat decided they were not worth saving." Yuna said. Minjun nodded in agreement. "My ship is fast and I know how to avoid patrols. Just tell me when we leave." They gathered supplies, medical equipment, water purifiers, atmospheric processors. Jinne worked around the clock, developing theories about how to fight the Grey Rot. "Human biology is remarkably different from most galactic species," she explained. "Our immune systems evolved on a death world where everything was trying to kill us, and that might actually be useful here." Sioha did not fully understand the science, but she trusted Jinne completely. On the 4th day, they launched. Minjun's cargo ship was old but reliable, packed with everything they could carry and everyone willing to risk their futures. As they approached the quarantine zone, Sioha received a transmission from Elder Kivani, the same voice from that first desperate message. "You came," Kivani said. And even through the static, Sioha could hear the tears in her voice. "We are coming," Sioha corrected her. "We are not there yet." The quarantine perimeter was enforced by Concord military vessels under the command of an officer named Threll. His ship appeared on their sensors long before they reached the boundary. "Human vessel, you are approaching a restricted zone." Threll's voice boomed over the communication channel. "Turn back immediately or face the consequences." Sioha took a deep breath and opened a response channel. "Commander Threll, This is Sioha of the Human Outpost Station. We are carrying medical supplies and humanitarian aid for the Valanxi people. The Valanxi situation has been classified as a containment scenario. Thrall replied, "No outside interference is permitted. Turn back now. With respect, Commander." "I cannot do that." There was a long pause. "Human, do you understand what you are doing? If you cross this line, you will be in violation of 17 different Concord statutes. Your government will be forced to disavow you, and you will never be able to return to civilized space." Sioha looked around at her small crew. Jinae gave her a firm nod. Minjin was already plotting the fastest course through the blockade. Yuna was checking her medical supplies one more time. "I understand completely," Sioha said, "but those people down there are dying, and someone has to help them." "Why?" Thrall demanded. "What are the Valanxi to you? They have nothing to offer humanity. No resources, no technology, no strategic value. Why would you throw away everything for them?" It was a fair question. And for a moment, Sioha struggled to find the right words. Then she thought about all the times in human history when people had asked the same question: why help strangers when there was nothing to gain? Why risk everything for people who could never repay the debt? The answer was simple: because they need us, Sioha said. And that is enough. She cut the communication channel and turned to Minjun. "Take us through." The cargo ship's engines roared to life as they accelerated toward the quarantine line behind them. Thrall's vessel powered up its weapons. Warning alarms filled the cockpit. Sioha gripped her seat and watched the planet growing larger in the view screen. Valanxi Prime was beautiful even now, its surface shimmering with crystal formations that caught the light of its twin suns. Somewhere down there, millions of innocent beings were waiting to see if anyone in the galaxy still cared about them. The ship shuddered as they crossed the invisible boundary. For one terrible moment, Sioha expected to feel the impact of weapons fire, but it never came. Thrall's voice came through one last time. "Quieter now. You are either the bravest humans I have ever encountered, or the most foolish. Either way, you are on your own now." The communication cut out. They were through. As they began their descent toward the planet's surface, Sioha allowed herself a small moment of hope. They had made it past the first obstacle, but she knew the real challenges were only beginning below them. A dying world waited for the Deathworlders, who had decided to save them.